Good morning. It's Friday, September 4th. This is IndigPatriot News. Hey. So, this article comes out of Canada, and the reason why I'm discussing it is because despite the border, the ways that our two countries, Canada and the United States, have treated its indigenous people don't altogether differ. Okay? I'm going to go with the center, 680 News. Children harmed by on reserve child welfare, a step closer to compensation. So, Indigenous children and their relatives harmed by chronic underfunding of child welfare services on reserves are a step closer to resolving claims for compensation. The federal government has agreed to certify the claims put forward by the Assembly of First Nations and a council for a national class action suit. Consenting to certification is a step forward in negotiating a compensation settlement. All three parties appeared in federal court Thursday and agreed to start mediation as soon as possible once a mutually acceptable mediator is appointed. The progress is being welcomed by both the federal government and the AFN. AFN National Chief Perry Bellegarde said the government's decision to work with the Assembly and its allies in addressing this tragedy is an important step. Systemic discrimination against First Nations children is abhorrent, Bellegarde said in a statement. It is crucial that Canada act in good faith in these upcoming negotiations, provide fair compensation to all those who suffered suffered harm, and implement real change. Only then can we bring closure to this sad chapter in our history. In a joint statement, Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller and Justice Minister Dave Lametti said the federal government's commitment to a prompt resolution of the claims is in line with system-wide reforms to Indigenous child welfare that are already underway. Discussions will continue in a spirit of collaboration in order to achieve a fair, equitable, and comprehensive resolution to compensation. A resolution that will prioritize the safety and well-being of First Nations children, the minister said. Okay, so last September, the tribunal ordered the government to pay 40 grand to each child harmed by the on-reserve child welfare system since 2006, and 20 grand to parents or grandparents whose children were taken from them. It's not an uncommon thing to see where Indigenous children are adopted out to non-Indigenous families, which separates them from their tribal histories and their tribal communities. It's a soft version of genocide, in my opinion, removing what makes a people the people, besides the DNA they share. Michigan teacher says he was fired after raising concerns over lack of masks in class. I'm going to go with the Hill. This is left 50, center 25, and right 25. So, a teacher in Michigan says he was fired by a private elementary school that refused to comply with the state's mask mandate for incoming students in the fall. How many more of these stories are we going to see as we reopen schools nationwide? I'm thinking a lot. It's kind of hard to keep elementary school kids in their seats, let alone with their masks on, let alone, not swapping food at the lunch table or, the stereotypical picking their noses. Maybe I'll move this a little bit to the side since my notifications up there seem to be taking up a lot of real estate. In an interview with Michigan Public Radio, Nathan Smith explained how he repeatedly warned Oakdale Academy's headmaster that students would face unsafe learning conditions in the fall due to the school's plans to make mask wearing voluntary for students and continue to hold all school gatherings in violation of orders preventing large social gatherings in the state. When you make masks when you make masks voluntary for children, what are they going to do with them? You might as well just say no masks. Smith said the school's head, David Stanton, declined to take seriously his repeated efforts to raise concerns about the school's violations and eventually fired him after asking him to resign. So masks are required for all students under the state's Safe Schools guidelines, but it reportedly isn't clear whether local authorities will take action to force the school or others to comply. Smith has raised concerns with the state's Occupational Health and Safety Administration, and local police and state Department of Education officials have reportedly been notified as well. Well, they're all notified now because it's out there in the news. Okay. Stanton declined to comment to NPR, but reportedly said in now private YouTube messages to the school's community that it will not enforce a mask mandate at the school. Let's release these videos if they are available. Let's see them. I do not want divisiveness here. I do not want to allow our enemy Satan to gain a foothold, not even a toehold in the school. This is why I advocate for keeping religion out of schools. Okay, we should be working on education, not propaganda. And I know that there's some people on the right that believe that education is propaganda, but that's small-minded of you. No one in this school will be judged for wearing a mask, and no one in the school will be judged for not wearing a mask. We cannot allow divisiveness to reign to the end. We cannot allow a debate about science to reign. It's not a debate. It's not a debate about science. Science is saying one thing, and you're saying another. That's not a debate. Anyway, Smith said that the headmaster's remarks amounted to a political stance at the cost of students' health and safety, and that is correct. Okay? Why are people gambling with their children? I don't get it. Why are you gambling with the most precious resource in your life? What my son means to me goes beyond anything else in this world, and I will not gamble. Anyway, I'm just appalled that instead of being able to brag about how good of a job we're doing, we're just trying to pretend like everything's normal, he told NPR. It seemed like they wanted to take a political stance against that, and that the students were going to pay the price. Oakdale Academy did not immediately return a request for comment from the Hill, and Stanton declined to comment to NPR. Sorry, that one annoys me. How a group of black Trump surrogates became an off-the-books Turkish lobbying campaign. This one's completely left. I'm going to go with Salon, because Salon happens to be the what Raw's story quotes. Actually, I want to go to Raw's story first, because what does this picture look like to you? It's like Trump's doing a boom boom, and the dude on his right's like, he didn't just... Did he just... I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Like, and you know, the guy in the bag's like, smells like hamburgers. I'm just messing. This body humor. So, in 2018, officials with the controversial pro-Trump nonprofit called the Urban Revitalization Coalition, which recently lost its tax-exempt charity status and made headlines earlier this year with suspicious cash giveaways to black voters, facilitated an off-the-books foreign influence campaign on behalf of powerful people in Turkey, according to social media posts and people familiar with the organization. Trump Tower, Turkey. That's a real thing, by the way. URC officials Daryl Scott and Kareem Lanier, both prominent Trump surrogates in the black community, are said by multiple sources to have used the organization as a vehicle to solicit donations, including from wealthy Turkish nationals. Some of these solicitations came by way of former MAGA world star Rabia Kazan, I think that's how you say it, whom they hired strictly for that purpose, according to Kazan and people familiar with the arrangement. Furthermore, an associate of Scott and Lanier named Bruce Level, a Trump surrogate, former congressional candidate, and small business association advocate, who was reportedly at one time in the running to head the cabinet level agency, allegedly shook Kazan for cash. I'm not sure how to say the last name. I need to look that up. Then asked her to destroy records after reports of government raids on former Trump attorney Michael Cohen's home and offices, according to Kazan and others familiar with the events. The foreign influence campaign was aimed at shaping U.S. policy in anticipation of an overarching deal with Turkey. It also intersected with Turkey's release of Andrew Brunson, an American pastor whom the government of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had been holding as a political prisoner. Text messages from an Erdogan aide obtained by Salon described the exchange as a gift from Turkey. In other words, a quid pro quo intended to benefit each country. Some of these activities, described in detail below, raise serious legal questions, such as violations of rules governing tax and lobbying law, experts tell Salon. Legal experts and people familiar with the URC told Salon that given these activities, the organization appears to have functioned as a shell lobbying and fundraising operation and a go-between that communicated with both the Trump administration and Trump campaign and Turkish interests close to Erdogan. This sounds so familiar to me after I'm sitting here highlighting portions of the bipartisan report on Russian interference, Volume 5. Anyway, this is a story about how peripheral players, including foreign nationals, worked on the legal margins of lobbying, campaign, and foreign agent laws amid the chaotic free-for-all of the Trump presidency. They blurred official and unofficial administration posts with other organizational and campaign roles and obscured the source and usage of funds from both the public and government agencies such as the IRS and Federal Elections Commission. It is also a story about how these peripheral and inexperienced players who found themselves suddenly close to the highest levels of power in the world ultimately failed. The hype of their social media diplomacy, and Trump's, has died away, as have their second-string attempts, along with those of experienced career U.S. and Turkish officials, to navigate the full range of geopolitical factors that make such negotiations so difficult. In this case, these negotiations involve one of the most politically complex countries in the world under the rule of an elected strongman amid a climate of war and perilous domestic uncertainty in both nations. Are we talking about Erdogan or are we talking about Donald Trump? I don't know. I mean, we could click the links. Why don't you do that? This is in the Ground News Act. While these trade negotiations received praise in the Turkish press, which wrote at one point that the prospective deal was expected to soar, it appears that the URC's efforts never got off the ground. Unlike in Turkey, they also went virtually unnoticed by the U.S. press. Not anymore. I'm bringing it to you, Indigenous Patriot News. Okay? In 2018, URC officials first curried financial favors and investments from Turkish businesses representatives in connection with an economic initiative launched by the Trump administration. Turkish business emissaries secured meetings in New York and Washington that extended to Trump officials, Republican members of Congress, and campaign surrogates such as Tom Barrack and Lara Trump. I think that's the same Lara Trump that just went and showed support to Laura Loomer, the Islamophobe, this self-purported Islamophobe that's been booted off of social media. What did she say? Something along the lines of how many more Muslims are we going to allow into our country after all the deaths we've had? Back in the day, we were using smoke signals going, how many more of these round eyes are we going to allow into this country because they're just wiping out our people? That didn't happen, guys. That's a joke. In any case, this goes on to talk about how URC made headlines when it held a campaign-tinged events with cash giveaways for black voters in poor communities, including a $25,000 raffle last December, something the organization had told the IRS it wouldn't do. Politico described the raffles as a nationwide strategy of holding events in black communities where they lavish praise on the president while handing out thousands of dollars in giveaways. It's buying votes. It is buying votes. Ethics watchdog Citizen for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, which is CREW, I follow them on Twitter, subsequently raised concerns that the organization was in breach of its promise to the IRS not to participate in political activities. URC's initial IRS application had promised that it would not give funds to individuals according to documents obtained by CREW, and it would not operate raffles. It appears to have done both of those things. The group also told the IRS it would not support or oppose candidates in political campaigns in any way. But its obvious pro-Trump activities raised questions about that too. It's no questions. It's there, right in front of our faces. But because the URC never filed a tax return, it's impossible to know much about the group's finances. Not only is fundraising unknown, so is its spending and the amounts it raised over the years. It sounds like a criminal enterprise to me. I'm not saying that it's a criminal enterprise. I'm saying it sounds like it's a criminal enterprise to me. U.S. facing sanction calls over funding threat, WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency. Okay, this is left 33, center 67. The right doesn't have much use for this news, I suppose. I'm going to go with Reuters. America's top athletes could be banned from the Olympics and other major international sporting events if the United States follows through on its threat to withdraw funding from the World Anti-Doping Agency. Anti-doping leaders told Reuters. So pre the fall of the Soviet Union, they had what was called the Iron Curtain that kept them isolated from from interacting with world organizations, and that didn't turn out too well, because when you have a wall around your properties, it's kind of hard to get your products out. It's kind of hard to. So Russia has all this oil and had nowhere to put it. U.S. threat has sent shockwaves through the anti-doping community and prompted several governments to urge WADA to introduce legislation that would find the U.S. non-compliant with the WADA code, effectively barring American athletes from international competition. Because you know what? Let's pull out of Open Skies Treaty. Let's pull out of Paris climate talks. Let's pull out of them all. I'll tell you something that that should have been pulled out of, but I'm not going to go too deep into that one. Let's get ourselves banned from the Olympics. What are you going to do now? In any case, the consequences of a withdrawal from of WADA funding by the U.S. could be more severe and far-reaching for American athletes. WADA president Witold Banka told Reuters. We have been approached by a number of governments of the world that were shocked by the threats from the U.S. government supported by USADA. How are you shocked at this point? If you're shocked at anything that comes out of this man's mouth, then you are not paying attention. You are not paying attention. Okay? This is going to get us kicked out of the Olympics, guys. I guess that'll free your summer up, right? South Dakota. It's like they're competing with Georgia right now. I'm not going to talk about why, but you can figure it out yourselves. South Dakota dismisses elite class of so-called experts, carries on with state fair after Sturgis rally drove COVID. I'm going to go with USA Today. South Dakota is one of the nation's hot spots for COVID-19 infections. That didn't stop another large-scale event from kicking off Thursday. That would be yesterday. The Rural South Dakota State Fair, which reported an attendance of 205,000 people last year, is set to run through Labor Day with more hand-washing stations, social distancing reminders, and an encouragement, but not a requirement, for attendees to wear masks. Let's look at Sturgis and see how that turned out. It comes on the heels of the state's two largest events, the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally and the Red Sioux Empire Fair. In the weeks following those events, South Dakota has emerged as a virus hotbed according to data analysis. State and national health experts say the rise in cases is likely fueled by a combination of factors, including school reopenings, small gatherings, and major events. Major events where, when you're looking at the pictures of the event, you see thousands of motorcycles, but hardly any masks, hardly any social distancing. Those large events have been made possible by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem's steadfast resistance to restrictive measures aimed at slowing the spread of the virus. She has discouraged schools from requiring masks, instead promoting hand washing as the best way to prevent infections, and railed against an elite class of so-called experts whose opinions impact individuals' liberties. So it is, you have a right to not wear a mask, that's fine, but you don't have a right to infect other people. You do not have a right to endanger the health of other people. That is not one of your rights. Okay, life, liberty. Life, liberty. Life comes first. I mean, it's literally like right there, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Not that they put them in any particular order, I'm just saying. But as cases surge in the state, public health officials are grappling with the impact of the Sturgis rally, which gained national attention as one of the largest events to be held since the onset of the pandemic. She's like, Noam's like, yeah, largest event. Who cares who got sick? Who cares who dies from it? Who cares? Okay, it's just the largest event because it's money in the pocket. The event has so far been linked to one death. In South Dakota, 118 residents who attended the rally subsequently tested positive for COVID-19. And things are, I talk about this in other topics, but it's like a concentric ring, okay? It's one person, and then that ripples out to other people, and that ripples out to other people, and that ripples out to other people, because that's how a pandemic reacts. While that's less than 1% of the more than 460,000 people who converged on Sturgis, Dr. Robert J. Kim Farley said it's likely the tip of the iceberg. Kim Farley, a professor of epidemiology and community health science at UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, told USA Today on Thursday that COVID-19 is a particularly difficult virus to trace to its infection point. Symptoms might not show up for weeks, if at all, in an infected person. Meanwhile, that person could be spreading the virus. Cell phone location data analyzed by the nonprofit COVID Alliance has found evidence that rally participants came from each of the 48 continental United States and more than half of the nation's counties. I work with somebody who went to Sturgis. The data also suggests participants were less likely to practice social distancing. They stayed at home less and traveled more compared to their neighbors. This behavior continued before and after the August rally, COVID Alliance data shows. And these are just the people that didn't do the whole, the government is watching you, so disable the COVID tracking on your phone or delete me from your Facebook. I don't know what that impression is. I don't know. Lori, what is that impression? Governor Kristi Noem remains focused on her hospitalization rate, not state's case count. Because we don't care about how we affect other states. We don't care about how we spread to other people. We don't even care that there's a sizable indigenous population in that state that not necessarily are going to be using your hospitals. While the rally's impact ripples across the nation, a spike in cases in South Dakota is also gaining national attention. The Mount Rushmore state has recorded the nation's third highest rate of coronavirus cases per capita over the last 2 weeks, according to the Associated Press, and the highest per capita rate in the nation for the past 7 days, according to New York Times data. A statement from Noem's office emailed to USA Today on Thursday says the Republican governor remains focused on our hospitalization rate, and we are encouraged by the fact that only 6% of our ICU beds are currently occupied by COVID patients. These people have come from 48 states. They're not going to be staying in your hospital beds. They're going to be staying in other people's hospital beds. You don't care about the other states. You don't care. You only care about how it affects you. You want the money that comes in from these people. You don't give a shit how it affects the communities. Okay? While hospitalizations are a more accurate metric for studying COVID-19 spread than cases, there's a lag time from days to weeks, Kim Farley said. It's a little bit early to say that hospitalizations haven't been affected. State epidemiologist Josh Clayton acknowledged that there is typically a 2-week lag between increases in cases and hospitalizations. Currently, less than 100 COVID-19 patients are hospitalized, well within the state's capacity. The pandemic and the surge of cases impacting the state fair, Candy Briley, the events assistant manager, told USA Today. So, while organizers are ready to welcome fairgoers to Huron, about 125 miles northwest of Sioux Falls, they understand some people might not feel comfortable coming out, and we respect their decision. For those who do, they'll be encouraged to keep their distance. Among the reminders, according to Briley, are signs featuring pigs that read, "Have a squeal of the time at the fair. Stay 6 feet apart." These people are, I don't know, South Dakota. All right. 2 more articles. Sorry, this is going to be a long one. What are we at right now? 26 minutes. I apologize. Left 80, center 20. State Department announces another acting watchdog in latest reshuffle. From the Hill. State Department is a new acting inspector general, marking the 3rd person in the role since President Trump abruptly fired the agency's internal watchdog in May. Matthew Klimo, who has served as U.S. ambassador to Turkmenistan since 2019, was appointed by Trump as acting inspector general on August 31st. A spokesman for the watchdog's office told The Hill on Thursday. It's a watchdog's office, and we are hiring ambassadors to Turkmenistan who were appointed in 2019. Who appoints these ambassadors? Klimo's appointment was first reported by Politico with no prior public announcement from the administration. A graduate of West Point and a retired Army colonel, Klimo has held numerous government positions over the past 2 decades, spanning the White House, State Department, and NATO. He was also awarded a Silver Star as a combat veteran, the nation's 3rd highest award for valor in combat. The Department of State appreciates Ambassador Klimo coming back to Washington, D.C. to fulfill the role of acting inspector general until the end of 2020. A State Department spokesperson wrote in response to a question from The Hill over the staff shakeup. Klimo is quietly taking over a watchdog post that has drawn intense scrutiny from Democrats. House lawmakers are investigating the president's ousting of longtime Inspector General Steve Linick, whom Trump removed from his post in May at the request of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Linick has served in his position since 2013, having been appointed by former President Barack Obama and continuing in the role for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency. Democrats charge that Linick may have been fired as an act of political retaliation for conducting at least 2 investigations into Pompeo's actions at the State Department. This includes a probe into whether the secretary and his wife used federal resources for personal benefit and the circumstances surrounding Pompeo's use of an emergency declaration to sell billions of dollars worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan without approval from Congress. And we just signed these UAE peace treaty things after giving them a bunch of weapons. The Inspector General report on the arms sales were published last month under the leadership of then-acting Inspector General Diana Shaw, who had taken over the report when Linick's immediate replacement, Stephen Ackard, recused himself from the probe. Shaw formally replaced Ackard as acting Inspector General last month when the State Department announced that he would be leaving the agency for private sector. He was in his position for less than 3 months. Shaw has returned to her position as Deputy Inspector General of the Watchdog Offices said. One more article, and then we can cut it for the day, guys. Until I release the my little read over of the Roger Stone stuff. Stay tuned. Trump falsely claimed he never called John McCain a loser. Just check his Twitter account. I'm going to go with the center. The right has nothing. It's 50-50, left, center. I'm going to cover the bulletins. President Donald Trump denied having ever called Senator John McCain of Arizona a loser, despite having previously tweeted out a news article that described him doing exactly that. Trump denied a report from The Atlantic that said he called McCain and President George H.W. Bush losers. Trump acknowledged on Twitter that he was never a big fan of McCain, who died in 2018, but said that despite their differences, he had never called John a loser. In 2015, Trump tweeted a link to a political blog that quoted him calling McCain a loser. He also stated something about I prefer people who don't get captured, or something along those lines. And we prefer people that don't claim bone spurs to skip out on the draft, buddy. Yeah. In any case, this has been IndigPatriot News. I'm at WIKWEKO on Twitter, IndigPatriot.com. 30 minutes, 46 seconds. Thank you.